My hands were shaking. The morning my husband slid the divorce papers across the kitchen table like they were a restaurant check, he was in a hurry to settle. No conversation. No warning. Just a manila envelope, and the sound of him clearing his throat. I had been married to him for 6 years. I had quit my job at a promising software startup because he and his mother insisted a wife should be present, available, supportive. I had poured every dollar of my savings into his real estate development company because he told me we were building something together. I had believed every word, every promise. Every Sunday morning, when he kissed my forehead and said, "We were a team." Then I found out atop my best friend. Then the envelope appeared on the table. And then his mother walked through our front door without knocking. Looked at me sitting there in my bathrobe with the papers in my hand. And said, "It's better this way. Honey, you were never really a good fit for this family. I want you to understand what that moment felt like. Not just the betrayal of a husband, but the betrayal of a woman I had known since college, who had stood next to me at my wedding, who had borrowed my car and eaten at my table and cried on my couch during her own hard seasons. The two of them had been seeing each other for nearly a year. A year. While I was cooking dinner and attending his company dinners, and smiling in photos at his parents' anniversary party, the two people I trusted most in the world were dismantling everything I thought I had. I signed the divorce papers 3 weeks later. I had no choice. My name was on nothing. The house was in his name. The investment I had made into his company was documented as a personal loan I had voluntarily forgiven, something his lawyer had buried in paperwork. I signed 2 years earlier when I thought I was signing a routine update to our financial records. My own savings account had been drained through joint expenses over the years. I walked out of that marriage with my car, my clothes, my laptop, and $4,200. His mother had the audacity to call me the following Tuesday to ask if I would return the pearl earrings I had worn at their family Christmas photo because they technically belonged to the family collection. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment 40 minutes from everything I had known. The walls were thin enough that I could hear my neighbor's television every night. I bought a second-hand couch from a Facebook Marketplace listing and ate cereal for dinner more times than I want to admit. My sister-in-law, his sister, posted a photo of herself and my former best friend at a brunch I used to host every spring. She captioned it, "New Season. Better Energy." 14 people I had considered mutual friends liked it within the hour. I did not have the luxury of falling apart for long. I still had my skills. Before I had quit to support my husband's ambitions, I had spent 4 years as a software engineer at a company called Meridian Technologies, a mid-sized B2B platform that had been steadily growing but hadn't yet hit its inflection point. When I left, I had negotiated to keep my vested stock options. At the time, they felt like a consolation prize. The company was doing fine, but nothing spectacular. And I genuinely forgot about those options for most of my marriage because my husband always waved them off as basically worthless whenever I brought them up. Looking back, I wonder if that was deliberate. I wonder how much he actually knew. 8 months after I signed those divorce papers, sitting cross-legged on my second-hand couch, eating leftover rice, my phone lit up with an email from Meridian's equity management platform. I almost swiped it away. I thought it was a routine notification. Maybe an update to their terms of service. I opened it because I was bored. Meridian Technologies had been acquired by a major enterprise software firm in a deal that valued the company at just over $1 billion. As a former employee with vested stock options, I was entitled to a liquidity event payout. The number on that screen was $9,400,000. I read it 4 times. I walked to my kitchen, drank a full glass of water, walked back, and read it again. Then I sat down on the floor because my legs stopped working. The funds were transferred over the following 6 weeks through the standard acquisition payout process. I told no one. I opened a new personal account at a bank I had never used before. I hired a financial advisor whose office was in a city 2 hours away. I changed my phone number and told only my mother and my younger cousin. I did not post anything. I did not change my apartment. I continued driving my same car. I kept going to the same grocery store. I wore the same clothes. From the outside, nothing about my life changed at all. I do not know exactly how they found out. My best guess is that Meridian's acquisition was covered in several regional business publications, and anyone who had known me well enough could have connected the dots. A former colleague may have mentioned it. There may have been a public filing that listed former employees eligible for the payout. Honestly, it does not matter how they found out. What matters is what happened the morning after the transfer cleared my new account. I woke up to 94 missed calls. 41 of them were from my ex-husband's number. 22 were from his mother. 17 from his sister. The rest were a mix of numbers I recognized his father, 2 of his cousins, and one that turned out to be my former best friend. Calling from a number I had never seen before, as if I would somehow not realize it was her. I sat on the edge of my bed and scrolled through them slowly. The way you look at damage after a storm. Then I put my phone face down on the nightstand, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat by the window until the sun came all the way up. My ex-husband's first voicemail was calm and measured. The voice he used in business meetings. The voice that had once made me think he was the most competent person in any room. He said he had been thinking about me. He said the divorce had been a mistake driven by stress and poor decisions on his part. He said he believed we owed it to ourselves to have a real conversation. He said he missed me. His second voicemail, left 40 minutes later, was less polished. He mentioned that he had heard about some good news in my life, and that as my former spouse, he felt we had unresolved financial entanglements worth discussing. By his fifth message, the language about missing me had disappeared entirely. His mother texted in addition to calling. The text began with "sweetheart" and escalated to a 3-paragraph message, explaining that the family had always considered me a daughter and that families work through difficulties when they are committed to one another. She included a story about her own parents' marriage, surviving hardship as though the comparison was not completely insulting. She did not mention the morning she walked into my kitchen and told me I had never been a good fit. His sister sent a voice memo. She said she had always been in my corner, which was interesting because she was the one who had posted the brunch photo. She said my former best friend was actually not doing that well, and that maybe I should find it in my heart to reach out. The entire message was constructed around the premise that I was someone who needed to be managed, rather than someone who had been wronged. I did not respond to any of them that day. I made an appointment with my attorney instead. What I had not told anyone, not even my mother, was that during those 8 months of silence, I had not simply been surviving. I had been paying attention. When you have nothing left to lose and nowhere to be, you notice things. I noticed that my ex-husband's real estate company, the one I had invested my savings into, had taken on a second private investor 6 months before he served me divorce papers. I noticed that some of the project documentation I still had access to through an old shared cloud folder contained numbers that did not line up with the public filings his company had submitted to the county. I noticed that one of his development projects, a commercial complex he had marketed to investors as fully permitted and shovel-ready, had actually failed its environmental review 18 months earlier. He had continued soliciting investment capital for it anyway. He had a folder? I had been building it quietly, methodically, with the focused energy of someone who had absolutely nothing else to do with her evenings. I handed that folder to my attorney, She looked through it for a long time without speaking. Then she looked up and said, "This is significant." She connected me with a securities fraud specialist. 2 weeks later, that specialist connected me with the relevant regulatory authorities. I did not have to do much after that. I simply answered questions and provided documentation. The process moved at its own speed. In the way these things do when the paperwork is clean and the pattern is clear. In the meantime, I let the calls continue without acknowledgement. My ex-husband pivoted from voicemails to emails. His mother showed up at my apartment building, and I watched her from my window as she stood in the parking lot for 20 minutes before leaving. His sister began messaging me on every platform I had not yet blocked, each message recalibrating its tone based on the silence she received in return. First sympathy, then nostalgia, then subtle pressure, then something that walked very close to a threat disguised as concern. My former best friend sent a single email. It was long and carefully written and full of the kind of language people use when they have rehearsed something many times. She said she was sorry. She said she had made a catastrophic mistake. She said she still thought of me every day. She said she and my ex-husband were struggling and that she thought perhaps I, of all people, would understand what it meant to be in a complicated situation. She signed it with a nickname she used to call me when we were 22 years old. And I think she believed that detail would soften something in me. It did not. I deleted the email and went for a long walk. The regulatory investigation moved faster than I expected. My ex-husband had not been careful. Overconfident people rarely are. The second investor, a retired contractor named Gerald, who had put $300,000 into the failed development project, had also noticed the discrepancies and had already filed a separate complaint. When the authorities combined our documentation, the picture became impossible to dispute. My ex-husband was charged with securities fraud and wire fraud in connection with the misrepresentation of project permits and financials to private investors. He called me 23 more times the week after he was served. I did not answer a single one. His attorney reached out to my attorney, suggesting that my cooperation with the investigation was retaliatory and that I had a personal motive to damage my ex-husband's reputation following our divorce. My attorney replied with the dates and timestamps on my documentation, most of which predated my learning about the affair by several months. The suggestion was not raised again. The trial was not dramatic in the cinematic sense. It was mostly documents and testimony, and a judge who seemed to have seen variations of this story many times before. My ex-husband's attorney argued that the permit situation had been a misunderstanding and that investor communications had been optimistic rather than intentionally fraudulent. The prosecution had emails. They had wire transfers. They had a project timeline that showed my ex-husband had known about the failed environmental review and had sent solicitation materials to Gerald and 2 other investors the following week anyway. He accepted a plea agreement. He was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison and ordered to make full restitution to the defrauded investors, which effectively dissolved his company and liquidated every asset he had spent 6 years accumulating. His mother called me the night the sentencing was announced. I answered this time. I wanted to hear what she would say. She cried. She said her son was a good man who had made mistakes. She said I had destroyed their family. I let her finish, and then I said, very calmly, "You came into my kitchen the morning he handed me divorce papers and told me I was never a good fit for your family. I'd like you to remember that you said that." Then I ended the call and blocked her number permanently. The restitution process wiped out the house. The beautiful house that had been in his name. In the house where I had planted a small herb garden on the back porch and repainted the guest bathroom, a shade of blue I had chosen carefully from 47 sample swatches, was sold at a loss in a court-ordered liquidation. His mother had been living there with them since shortly after our divorce. She had to move into a two-bedroom condo near his sister's neighborhood. A significant step down from the lifestyle she had considered her natural right. The country club membership she had held for 11 years became an expense she could no longer justify. I did not feel guilty about any of it. I had not done anything to her except tell the truth. His sister issued a public statement on her social media, condemning me for cooperating with the investigation. The post got 22 likes and 17 critical comments from people who had apparently been following the situation. She deleted it after 4 days. Last I heard, she had quietly unfollowed everyone connected to me and was going through her own financial difficulties after a business venture she had launched with investment money from her brother turned out to have been partially funded through the same compromised accounts now frozen by the Bossy court. I did not look into it further. It was not my problem anymore. My former best friend did not fare better. Her relationship with my ex-husband did not survive his legal troubles. She had moved into my house, into the room at the end of the hall that I had set up as a reading nook, and when the court-ordered sale came through, she had 30 days to find somewhere to go. She had left a stable career to be available to him. A decision that had apparently been made with the same confidence she had applied to most of her choices in that chapter of her life. Without his income, and with her own professional reputation, carrying the weight of a very public scandal, she was starting over from a position that offered very little traction. I knew this because her sister, who had never liked her much, sent me a message to apologize on behalf of their family. I thanked her and told her it wasn't necessary. I took 6 months before I made any significant decisions about the money. I had learned from watching people around me that sudden wealth applied quickly to a life not yet rebuilt tends to build impressive-looking things with unstable foundations. I traveled. I visited my cousin in Colorado and my mother in the house I grew up in, where she made the chicken soup she had been making my entire life and did not ask me a single question about finances or futures. I slept a full 8 hours for the first time in what felt like years. I read books I had been meaning to read. I ran every morning and felt my body remember what it was like to move without the weight of constant low-grade dread. When I came back, I knew what I wanted to do. I bought a house, a real one, in my name, with a back porch where I immediately planted an herb garden. I took my time choosing the paint colors for every room. I hired a contractor to add a home office with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, which had been the one thing I had always wanted and had always been talked out of as impractical. I furnished it slowly, buying things I actually loved rather than things that fit a catalog aesthetic someone else had chosen. Then I did the thing I had been thinking about for months. I established a foundation, a small, focused one specifically designed to provide technical training grants and mentorship to women who had left the workforce to support a spouse's career and were trying to re-enter the technology industry. Women who had done what I had done, women who had believed in someone else's vision at the cost of their own and were now sitting in small apartments trying to remember what they were capable of. The application process was straightforward, and the first cohort of 12 women started their program on a Tuesday morning in October. I stood at the back of the room and watched them introduce themselves to each other. And I thought about the morning I sat on my kitchen floor reading that equity notification 4 times, unable to stand up. I thought about the 94 missed calls. I thought about his mother's voice, telling me I had never been a good fit. I was a good fit. I had been a good fit all along. The problem was never mine. There is something that nobody tells you about surviving a season of complete destruction. When people talk about rebuilding, they tend to focus on the material things, the money recovered, the status regained, the visible markers that signal to the world that you are doing fine again. But the real rebuilding happens in much smaller moments. It happens the first time someone tries to make you feel small, and you do not flinch. It happens when you sign a document, and every name on it belongs to you alone. It happens when you plant something and know that no one can take you away from it. For most of my marriage, I had been handed a version of myself that other people found convenient. I was useful when I was quiet, present when I was needed, and ignorable when I was not. The cruelest thing that was done to me was not the affair, or the financial manipulation, or the divorce papers on the kitchen table. The cruelest thing was the slow, sustained effort to make me believe that my value was conditional, that I was only worth something when I was serving someone else's ambitions. That is the thing I had to fully dismantle before any amount of money meant anything real. The boundaries I hold now are not punishments. They are not performances of strength for anyone watching. They are simply the honest expression of what I will and will not accept in my own life. And I maintain them without apology and without explanation. My ex-husband can make his restitution payments from whatever job is available to him when he gets out. His mother can rebuild her social life on her own terms. His sister can sort out her own complications. My former best friend can find her own way through. None of that is my responsibility. It never was. If you have ever handed someone everything you had, your time, your trust, your ambition, of your savings, and watched them treat it like it was owed to them, I want you to hear this clearly. That is not a story about your weakness. It is a story about their character. The willingness to give fully is not a flaw. What you do after you realize who you gave it to, that is where your power actually lives. I have been asked, more than once, whether I regret the years I lost. I do not think that framing serves me. Those years happened. They shaped the specific quality of attention I brought to every detail of my documentation. They developed the patience that kept me silent through 94 missed calls. They gave me an understanding of exactly what it feels like to have nothing, which is the most essential foundation I could have brought to building something for women who are standing in that same place now. I do not carry what happened to me as a wound anymore. I carry it as information. Drop your story in the comments below. I want to know how you found your way back to yourself. Like and subscribe if this resonated with you. And join our community here at Restoration Stories, where every week we share the kind of stories that remind you who you actually are when no one is trying to make you forget. Until next time, protect your peace. Trust your instincts. And remember that every door they close on you is one less room you have to clean up after them.